Hey, this is Lisa Graves with Court Accountability Action here on the Legal AF channel for the Midas Touch Network. And I am joined again by the amazing Rachel Rossi, who leads the Alliance for Justice. And right now we're going to talk about the threats we're facing from the federal judiciary, in particular from the U.S. Supreme Court. So Alliance for Justice has been at the forefront of fights to let people know what's happening with the courts, who the nominees are, and this has been a long-standing, multi-decade effort. Rachel is the new leader of Alliance for Justice, and we are facing a new Supreme Court term. And so I wanted to get Rachel's thoughts about what's happening with the Supreme Court right now. I have views on this, as you all may know, but I want to hear from Rachel about what you're seeing, what you're looking at in terms of this new Supreme Court term, which begins in October.
Thanks so much for having me, Lisa. Really, it is an honor to be with you here. And yes, AFJ has long focused on both the federal nominees to our courts, but also we've looked very closely at the Supreme Court and sort of where it's heading in the future. One of the things that, I thought is helpful to kind of start to frame what we are worried about in the next SCOTUS term is really taking a look at what just happened in the shadow docket. Because I think, that really helps us to understand where this Supreme Court is leaning, and it's extremely terrifying. But so, the shadow docket is an emergency mechanism where you could sort of go outside of the regular briefing and oral argument schedule to get emergency requests done, right? And what we've just seen before the term even started in October is that the Supreme Court is granting emergency requests from the Trump administration at an unprecedented rate and granting the requests of the administration at an unprecedented rate. So this Supreme Court is going out of its way to rule in favor of the Trump administration. And these are things like allowing the administration to deport non-citizens into countries they've never set foot in, giving Trump's Doge access to millions of Americans' private information, allowing the mass firing of federal workers, so many really, really harmful actions that we've seen. And again, in an emergency docket situation where SCOTUS is saying, we're going to kind of bend over backwards to support this administration and its actions. So that's sort of the framing that we think about when we're looking forward toward the upcoming Supreme Court term. And some of the cases that we're seeing that will be coming up in the court's docket are really critical cases. We've got cases involving federal limits on campaign expenditures, on how much political parties can spend in coordination with their candidates. So that's the National Republican Senatorial Committee versus the FEC Commission. We're also seeing redistricting cases that I think will be very telling. So the Louisiana versus Calais cases, basically in those cases, there's a challenge to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And there's a question of whether a congressional map enacted by Louisiana's legislation was unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. So that's going to be a pivotal case, not only for Louisiana, but also for other redistricting efforts we're seeing across the country. We're also seeing...
If I could, I was going to interject real quick and just ask you, just quickly to go back and talk about this shadow docket, and then come forward to these democracy cases. So that shadow docket, I promise our audience that I didn't ask you to say unprecedented, even though my book is called Without Precedent, because I do feel like we're in this era without precedent with John Roberts and these Republican appointees, but it really is unprecedented. And we don't know the reasons in some instances why they have overturned decision after decision after decision of these brave lower court judges who issued rulings in plain sight, grounded on longstanding law. And yet you have this partisan majority on the Supreme Court that is overturning them without having full briefing, amicus briefs, oral arguments so the public can see what's going on, and without even giving opinions in many instances about why they're overturning these lower court rulings, these injunctions that are designed to keep the status quo in place while the merits are resolved. So I wondered just if you could talk a little bit about the dissents, or that it's not the whole Supreme Court, it's the partisan, in my view, the partisan, John Roberts led part of the Supreme Court that's engaged in this unprecedented activity.
Yes, and when you say unprecedented, I believe many have actually looked at the data and counted up the numbers, and it is unprecedented. Just
Yep.
the number
Yep.
of cases being granted this emergency review and the amount of rulings in favor of this administration. And you're right. One of the things that we're seeing that I think is encouraging for the public is the way that, our justices like Justice Jackson are being incredibly brave and so in their dissents to really outline what's really going on. Not just to say, we disagree, but to really outline what we're not seeing in the full decision or in the oral argument or in the briefing to make sure that the public understands, the real gravity of a lot of these rulings. Like you said, I think one of the other, the two really troubling things about the shadow docket, one is you're not getting the full briefing, right? But the second is that you're not getting the reasoning of the court. So the court is simply ruling to stop lower court actions, to rule in favor of the Trump administration and not having that independence and accountability to the public to tell us why they're ruling that way. So I would advise anyone who's interested in kind of understanding Supreme Court cases, read the dissents first.
Yep. Yeah. It is really, it's so potent, and it shows how our democracy is in crisis, which is why I'm so glad that you highlighted two of the big cases that this Supreme Court has decided to take on this term. And these are discretionary decisions by this court. This is a majority on the court basically saying they want to take on the question of the applicability of the Voting Rights Act, the landmark 1965 law. They want to take on longstanding rules limiting the coordination of political candidates, their parties, or their PACs with outside groups. And so I definitely want to have you back on again, Rachel, to talk about the rest of the docket. But can you tell us a bit about why you're concerned, why Alliance is concerned that this court is teeing up more cases that look like they're poised to dismantle other protections in our democracy for our democratic process?
Right. And I would add to the two cases we've discussed already, the Bost versus Illinois State Board of Elections, a challenge to counting mail-in votes after election
Oh,
day.
yes.
So
Yeah.
when you think about, what the Supreme Court majority has indicated their leaning is in this moment and what their desire is. And when you take into account that, yes, like you said, this is their decision to take up these cases. That is exactly our fear, that we are going to see the erosion of voting rights, that we're going to see the doors open to more unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. And then we've got, of course, cases on conversion therapy with LGBTQ plus youth, transgender sports cases. There's just so many cases where we fear that the Supreme Court is getting ready to really erode the rights of the public.
Yeah, I mean, this court, this Roberts court, in my view, is out of control. It's acting in a way that, like, it's basically an arm of the political party of the party that appointed these judges to the court, not acting like fair judges, but acting like rubber stamps, in essence, for whatever the Republican Party wants to do to change the rules of the game, to basically rig the rules of the game with the upcoming 2026 election. In the sort of the lens of what's coming up next in terms of any opportunity for accountability, for a firewall, in terms of holding this administration and holding the people who are aiding it in some of these really counter-constitutional, in my view, anti-constitutional actions, notwithstanding what John Roberts and his fellow Republican appointees want to claim the Constitution says. They're rewriting the rules to aid Trump. So as we go out here today on this second part, and definitely want to have you back, Rachel, can you tell us how people can find out more about the work you're doing to help oppose these judicial nominees, to help counter the extreme rulings and edicts of this Supreme Court? What can people do, and where can people find ways to work with you?
Absolutely. One thing I'll end on, because it's been a lot of doom and gloom in both of these episodes, is just a reminder that the people are not powerless. Our collective power is so much stronger than we think it is. And so AFJ, we're taking steps to both, in the immediate, really oppose these judicial nominees, really bring light to the public about what the Supreme Court is doing. But then also, we can't wait to prepare for 3.5 years from now. We have to be working now to continue building the bench, thinking about movement lawyers, progressive people to be prepared to be on the judiciary. We got to keep thinking about ethics reform and other reforms that will really fortify the independence of our courts and make sure that our courts do work for the people. But most of all, I would say we can't lose hope. We can't let the changing standards of terrible cause us to forget what we're fighting for, which is a court that looks like and represents the people and true justice. And folks can absolutely get involved by going to AFJ's website. You can follow us. You can make your voice heard. You can join rallies. You can connect to a lot of the resources that we're creating. And just know that together we are stronger. When you connect with AFJ, when you connect with local neighborhood groups, when you connect with other nonprofits fighting in this space, you're part of a community that is fighting for equality and justice. And linking arms together, we can win.
Oh, that's wonderful. We are stronger together, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to having you back on again. This is Lisa Graves with Court Accountability Action, part of the Midas Touch Network on the Legal AF channel. Thank you so much. Please subscribe, please share, and Rachel, please come back and join us again. Thank you, everyone.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.